Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey, Richard. How are you?
Hey, hi, Mark. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. I take it you're back on this side of the pond, the North American side. Yeah.
Yeah, I am. I'm back for a while.
You got quite a bit of skiing in this year, as usual, right?
Yeah, I did. I skied 71 days, but I had an ignominious end. I was practicing giant slalom and went off the course and did a major face plant and dislocated my shoulder.
Ouch.
So I'm
Ouch.
having fun learning how to do everything left-handed.
Wow. Well, at least you didn't hit a tree or something like that, because that's the big word, because trees don't move, you know?
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm really excited to have you back on memoQ Talks. Last time we were talking about linguistic validation and some of the really cool things that memoQ has done to facilitate that process. And now we're going to be talking about the in-country review feature, and what ICR in-country review is, how it works, what are the challenges and all that. But to kind of kick things off, maybe for those who do know but might have a different perspective, or those who don't know, what is in-country review?
Yeah, sure. Generally, content is created in one place in a sort of a one-to-many distribution model, and the endpoints to where that content is distributed have certain cultural norms and also factual norms, and so the in-country review gives the people that are distributing the content in the geographies the opportunity to change or comment on the content and make it more appropriate to their locale.
So like I might be, managing a large translation project for manuals or marketing, materials, and I might be going into 10 different languages. I would get those, all of those initial translations would come back to me, but I'd probably want to have somebody in my Japan office actually check the Japanese translation, somebody in China check the Chinese, somebody in German check the German, to make sure that one, the language is sound, but that it fits it's appropriate for the target audience culturally and verbally, textually. Yeah,
absolutely. All of that. There's the local lingo, the slang that real users use, regardless of what kind of product it is. There's also cultural norms. For example, in Germany, you can't have comparative advertising. People that create content in North America might not know that and might say our product is better than that product. Can't say that.
That's very, very civilized. That's very, thou shalt not disparage the competition.
Yeah, right.
I like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, there's stuff like that. One of my motives has always been the product's not finished until it passes quality in Germany and Japan.
Yes, they have a very high bar in both those locations. So traditionally, how has that process been carried out?
Yeah. Traditionally, content, we're talking mostly about written content here, is distributed to the various locales in the form of a document. Could be a Word document, could be a PDF. Then subject matter experts in those locales review the document and might attach sticky notes or put comments in a Word file and that kind of thing. And that works well in some ways because that kind of content is presented to the reviewers in a way that they can use it, because these reviewers are subject matter experts and not necessarily translators. So they're not versed in the translation technology, but they can use Word, or they can use a browser, or they can use PDFs usually. The problem with that is it's divorced from the actual translation process, in that it's out of the translation environment that the translators are used. So you have to create this content, send it out, have it annotated, then somehow get it back, and then get those annotations back into the translation environment where the translators are using it. So it's cumbersome.
That would be a lot of work. Again, using the example of some, if you're managing a project into 10 different languages, having to take that feedback, and maybe you would accept it, maybe you would debate it. There might be some back and forth on it. They might ask you some questions that you would have to check with the linguist on. So as the project manager, you're communicating with the in-country reviewer, but you're also communicating with the linguist. And when you do that via email, and even on with a single language, but if it was multiple languages, it could be, like you said, very cumbersome.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I also, one of our customers with whom I've spoke, that's kind of an early adopter of our ICR module in memoQ, said a lot of times the reviewers over review, or they write too much, and that has to go back and get tamed down by the linguists again. So there's a lot of noise that can get introduced, not to mention logistical back and forth.
And you mentioned too that even if you do have a platform that allows for them to do review in the context of the translation management system, or using a CAT tool, many of the reviewers, they might be people in the sales team, the marketing team. They're not power translators, for example, and they don't have experience with those tools, right? So even if you do roll out the tool, you need to make it, I would assume, as lightweight and intuitive, accessible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I first ran across ICR. Well, I first ran across ICR when I worked in the German office of a Texas-based software manufacturer. And sometimes our colleagues in Texas would write stuff that we in Germany would go, "What?" But then later on, I was working for a CAT tool provider, and that tool provider had a customer that was a very large church, and some of the churches produce an enormous amount of content. And this is religious commentary, comments on the scriptures, all kinds of lifestyle advice, all kinds of stuff, and that gets reviewed in all corners of the earth. It's amazing where that content goes, and you don't necessarily have might have a religious scholar in Ethiopia who's really, really versed on the Bible, but has no idea what a CAT tool is.
Right. So maybe you can walk through, because that is the challenge. If you're going to have an in-country review tool, but the target user often isn't technically adept in those type of systems or platforms, you need to make it, as I said, it's very lightweight and intuitive, easy to use. But that can be challenging as well. So can you walk us through the process that memoQ kind of went through, and then to develop the ICR tool or features that we have? And then we'll talk about some specific use cases, like, for example, a large manufacturer. Maybe we can go back to the church scenario as well. But what were some of the challenges, and how did we do this?
Well, one of the challenge was to make it really easy to use. In today's world, pretty much everybody around the world can use a browser. So
on a good day, I can too. Yes, on a good day.
That's kind of the best common denominator, common technological denominator today as we speak.
And I don't want to jump ahead of you, but I was just thinking about, it's funny how many different apps are having plugins now and connectors that you can just access the app via the browser, and it has this just super easy to use, intuitive kind of interface. But I'm not even sure if that's the direction you're going, but
Well, yeah. We did have a customer that had a real need, an immediate need. It was a purchase criterion to be able to review using a browser. The best we had at that time, this was several years ago now, was memoQ Web, which has a relatively simple user interface, much simpler than the Windows thick client. But even that was way too complicated. So we did a sort of an early case study with this customer where the business services teams actually used the style sheet in the background and took away a lot of the bells and whistles, just removed them from the user interface. And that worked kind of, sort of. Was certainly better than nothing, but it wasn't scalable. And as soon as you do an update, then then the new version has all the bells and whistles back, so you have to go in and remove them all over again. So that was really not a sustainable process. But it kind of proved the concept that a browser-based user interface for ICR would be good. And then so the decision was made by the memoQ management to really invest the development time in creating a dedicated in-country review tool. And that was a complete new development. It's actually based on a much more modern platform than memoQ Web is, the technological platform. And it allows for a certain degree of interactivity that memoQ Web doesn't have, and better usage of the features of the web, including accessibility. So that's the direction. There was a big learning curve for the development team to learn how to use this new platform and the front end work, and then they're actually use that as a basis, as a learning curve to move forward in revamping the memoQ Web in the future. So there was a big learning curve there. In terms of design goals, I mean, there were the business goals, and what do we want to accomplish with this? What do our customers really need from it? And then what kind of technical constraints are there? And then what do the actual hands-on users need to be most effective in doing in-country review? And that's not only the reviewers, but also the project managers. How can the project managers, they need a certain degree of configurability because they have, let's say, different classes of reviewers. Some might be allowed to comment on the terminology, and others might not be able to comment on the terminology. Some might be able to rewrite stuff. Others might only be asked to make commentary. So a certain degree of configurability of the ICR tool to the specific review audience was also a design goal.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is for the end user, when I would say the in-country reviewer, typically you would want to make the platform or the tool is lightweight and easy to use. But for the project manager, you need to build in a certain amount of sophistication so that they can have profiles of users and say, yeah, this person is allowed to do this person is not. And so it's kind of funny. You have this outward thing that looks really, really simple and easy to use, but behind the scenes, there's a fair amount of complexity.
Yeah. User interface design is kind of like ballet. If ballet is well done, you don't see the physical effort that goes behind the scenes. User interface design is like that too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that security would be an issue for users. They're like, hey, we've got our people using this tool all around the world. We want to make sure it's secure. How did you address that, and what was needed?
Well, yeah, one of the big security issues in the quote unquote traditional way, where the content is going into some external system, be it email or some other system, it's traveling in an insecure manner. out to the reviewers, then getting reviewed in some platform that's not necessarily secure, traveling back in an insecure manner, and then has to be re-entered into the secure environment. And that was a prime design goal, to keep everything within one secure environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and memoQ offers that.
Yep.
Another goal is to mitigate user errors, because users can introduce errors. Either they correct too much, or they introduce spelling errors, or they introduce linguistic errors of like poor grammar, that kind of thing. So the platform should mitigate the capability of users to make errors.
How does it do that?
By restricting what they can do.
Okay.
Yeah. Then there's the whole aspect of centralization, keeping everything in one platform. The content is in the memoQ ecosystem. The external reviewers are actually working within the memoQ ecosystem, so the content actually never leaves that ecosystem. So it remains centralized. And that's an attribute of memoQ Web altogether, is that the content remains centralized. Yeah.
And then after a reviewer does the work, I'm assuming that there's an approval process. The project manager could accept it, or the lead linguist could accept the revisions. And does that go into the TM then, or do you have the option of adding it to the TM or not adding it?
Yeah, it kind of goes into limbo, and then it gets reviewed, and then it gets approved and goes into the translation memory. It might go into what we call a working translation memory while the project is ongoing. And then as part of the wrap-up process, usually the working TMs are then folded into what we call the master TMs. And that becomes the gold standard for future reuse. Another design goal is the development team wanted to avoid the in-country review module being yet another CAT tool that was designed for linguists. It's actually designed for lay users. It's simple. It tries very hard to not overwhelm the lay user that in the way that a CAT tool would, if you were to ask a lay user to use a CAT tool.
And where are we now with the the launch and the version and what can the ICR tool do exactly at this point, and what will it get to do in the future?
Yeah. As of the memoQ 10.5 version, which came out several months ago, the user end of the ICR tool was in place. That's finished. It's solid. For our larger customers, it was really important that the configurability aspects be exposed through the APIs, so that our customers that use BMS software, a FlowFit or a PluNet or an XCRF, so those customers could, that is, those BMS providers could add the configurability aspects to the BMS software, and that will be coming out with memoQ 11, which is due out in the midsummer.
So what about the ability to, the preview function? Explain what that is, and where are we at with that? And
yeah, preview is the holy grail, and the current ICR tool offers preview only in a somewhat limited way. there is the intent in our development team to enhance the preview in successive versions of ICR moving into the later part of 2024. Preview is a really thorny issue because it's dependent on the file type. There are certain file types that require some kind of a preview server that's created by the actual software publisher of that particular file type.
So when you say preview, are you basically allowing the reviewer to see the translation in the final context of where that translation will appear?
Yeah.
So if it's a UI, they would actually get a glimpse of the translation in that UI user interface.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Yeah, and in a ideally wonderful world, the reviewer would see the final layout, but that's very, very difficult to achieve technically.
Mm-hmm.
What memoQ has is an HTML-based emulation of the preview for various file types, and it works better for certain file types than others. For Word, for example, it works very well, but for other file types, it's I'd say at best, let's call it an abstracted preview. So there is a huge room for improvement in that area, and our developers are scratching their heads real hard in order to bring that to market.
I'm curious how you work together as a team to kind of develop the features, the roadmap for that. Because, I mean, as you know, I'm running a SaaS platform and we're developing software.
Yes.
It's memoQ RFP, soon to be rebranded. And, there's this kind of ongoing discussion because you can look at the competition. You can actually talk to the customers. You can talk to your people who are interacting with the customers, like me and our chief revenue officer. Yeah. And sometimes you'll be able to triangulate and say, everybody's saying we need this feature. Yeah. And sometimes not, that you'll have some debate there. But also you have to look at how much time and how many resources are going to be required for feature A. And maybe instead of feature A, we can go for features B, C, and D in the same time with the same expense. And it might not be the holy grail, but it will tick a lot of boxes. So how are you guys working through those kind of scenarios?
Yeah. Our product management team is really diligent in maintaining dialogue with selected key customers that are sophisticated users. And in the particular case of ICR, that have a real need for the ICR. Let's take, for example, one very large industrial manufacturing company that makes heavy equipment and all that kind of thing. These customers have been, or that particular customer has been involved right from the get-go in the early stage wireframe design. Wow. Throughout the entire process, and they have their issues and what their needs. This particular company's needs. They have a very diverse product portfolio, and the translators just can't. Even though they're highly competent translators, they cannot know all of the current lingo in all of the markets. So they really, really need to have the ICR functionality in order to have their user manuals truly accurate. Another customer that has been part of this whole process in the last couple of years is in the life sciences, where a review is actually mandated part of their document release process, and so they have a real need as well and they also have huge security needs. So they were really happy about participating in the dialogue. And so the product has been developed with these customers in mind. And the product management team does, as you say, they triage the needs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's the rollout process or best practices for a large manufacturing company, a pharmaceutical company where they've got people all around the world, and hey, we've got this new tool. So do we have some best practices for how they get that tool out to their people?
Well, there's always going to be an education process. So we try to help them with that. We provide the documentation, we provide the training, and the memoQ philosophy toward training is train the trainers. So we provide the product champions within those customers with the knowledge that they need to disseminate the practices out to their users.
Excellent. And how, in your estimation, how long does it take for a reviewer to get their sea legs and get up and running with our ICR tool?
The initial feedback has been good.
Okay.
Bear in mind that this has really been in its current form only several months, so we're still early days. And we also, for some of our larger customers, the necessity to have ICR embedded in the business management partner solutions was a roadblock. So we're just on the cusp of seeing that happen over the course of the summer and into the fall. And this is cutting edge stuff. As far as I know, none of our competitors have anything like ICR.
That's awesome. And again, but like if I'm an in-country reviewer, how long do you think it'll take me to figure out how to use the tool?
I would say a matter of minutes.
Wow. That sounds like a no-brainer then. I mean, because you've got, you're streamlining the process in terms of the project management side. You're making it more secure. You're not sending files via email. You have version control, real live. You can attach notes and comments.
Yep.
It's integrated with the TMS, so you can update your TMS when you want to. You may even be able to grant access to different terminology databases, etc. So to me, it's just a no-brainer. And if it's easy to use and you can get running, you go in a couple minutes. I think this is a huge, I guess, benefit.
Yeah. One of the features I neglected to mention actually is there's also built-in user guidance. There's like a built-in tutorial.
Oh, great. Let's say one of the bubbles that pop up and say, hey, click here or do that. Oh, those are super helpful. Yeah.
The users can actually get direct in the user interface can get guidance as to how to use it. So let's assume that it's a real neophyte user and the project manager presents that user with, say, the simplest version of the user interface. They'd be up and going right away.
That's awesome. Hey, memoQ, we work with a lot of LSPs all around the world as well. And I'm wondering if the use cases and the requirements for ICR are any different from these, industrial or enterprise level users versus language service providers. Are they looking for the same thing or some things slightly nuanced different?
Yeah, well, the core process remains the same. Just in the case of the LSP, you've got a service provider in the middle, and indeed, one of our early adopter partners is a large service provider, and it's actually that particular service provider that really needs the preview. And in fact, they won a customer back by demonstrating to the customer the ICR capabilities. So that customer had actually gone to a different LSP, and our partner LSP won the customer back through ICR.
I like it. I'm just thinking from a sales point of view. If I'm an LSP and I can offer my end customers this ability to have their in-house people act as ICR, and they don't have to invest in any tools, any training. It's lightweight.
Yeah.
There's that sales aspect to it. There's also the security aspect to it, the being able to track all revisions and everything like that.
Yeah.
I think that makes an LSP more competitive amongst their target audience, right? Because they're able to facilitate this process in a much more efficient, secure, lower cost manner.
Absolutely true. And also it quantifies. It helps to quantify and objectify the review process. Before I worked for memoQ, well, quite a time before I worked for memoQ. In fact, I worked for a software company, and we would send out the translated content to the markets, the regions, and a lot of times we'd get, the reviewer would be somebody in sales, and they, and not to disparage salespeople, but
please don't.
But we would
take my sales hat off now. No, go ahead. Throw some mud. Go ahead.
But we would get commentary back like, "Oh well, the translation stinks," and so it's, well, how does it stink?
Can you be a little bit more specific, please?
Yeah, and having a software forum where the review is specific and objective, and it takes the emotion out of it, because it's objectified. That's a really important aspect to actually getting the best value out of the in-country review process. You need the factual criticism.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Well, Richard, it sounds like an amazing tool, and you were part of that process of the development and rolling out of it. What's next? Yeah, I mean, you're only as good as your last win, right? So, hey, what's next, Richard?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that our developers will resolve the preview functionality issue for the much more difficult file types.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say I'm cautiously optimistic, I am also patient, because it's a very, very difficult problem to solve. But in my ideal world, that would be next. We need to get feedback from our larger scale customers that will be using ICR through their BMS software partners. In order to facilitate that, by the way, we provided the early version of the ICR APIs to our major BMS partners, so they've had an early start. So we're hoping that the stars will align sort of midsummerish, and we'll see a combined release together with Fluent or FlowFit, or one of the partners that have gotten the early release.
Awesome.
That's going to be nice to see that, and then we can really get the user feedback, the hands-on. How does this really work now that you've got it? How are you really using it? Nothing trumps actual hands-on user feedback.
100% agree. I mean, we're with the SaaS company that I'm running. We just launched our beta product, and we're getting all kinds of feedback. Some good, some bad, some ugly, but it's all good in terms of it validates or doesn't validate what we're thinking we need to do. And so, you can't develop in a bubble. You need to get it out to the market and get that feedback. So are there any public demos up on YouTube or anything like that that I can put a link to in the show notes? Or if somebody wants to see a demo, they should just reach out to memoQ and talk with one of our Sales Hub leaders?
I believe that there has been I would have to look for it and give you the URL. I think that there has been at least one webinar,
Okay.
and maybe more. I'll give that to you. But by all means, I would encourage any customer who's interested to reach out to the sales team in their local region and ask for a demo.
Awesome. Well, hey, Richard, thank you so much for all the great work that you've done, you and your team, and all of our memoQ colleagues in terms of getting these kind of features developed or these tools developed. And two, thanks for coming on memoQ Talks, man. It's always great talking with you, and it just keeps me motivated about the company because I see, we continually are, and I'll take my marketing hat off in a second, but we are kind of out there innovating, and we've got the AGT, and we have the linguistic validation functionality, which is huge in the life sciences industry. And now we've got this in-country review, which is also in life sciences, but can be used by so many different types of organizations. So this is all great stuff. So thank you. Yeah,
you're very welcome. And I got to say, the last couple of years at memoQ have been just absolutely fascinating ride.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, awesome.
It's a cool place.
Yep. Talk soon.
Cheers.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.